Hello everyone, my name is Jill Cimorelli. You may know me from my YouTube channel, also called Jill Cimorelli. I have been doing DIYs on YouTube for about 2 years now, and I am so excited to be here with Good Housekeeping TV to show you 3 spooky Halloween DIY decor ideas. So the first thing that I'm going to be showing you how to make is this DIY eyeball wreath, which is going to be really cool and spooky. The second thing I'm going to be showing you are little lanterns that look like different spooky creatures. And the last thing I'm going to be showing you is how to make a scary ghost. For the eyeball wreath, you're going to need some ping pong balls to make our eyeballs. You're also going to need googly eyes to make the ping pong balls actually look like eyes. You're going to need some sort of foam wreath. If it's white, it's better because then if anything shows through, it won't look different. You're also going to need a hot glue gun, some ribbon to hang your wreath, and some scissors. So we're going to kick off this DIY by taking our ping pong balls and attaching them to our wreath here. So I have this hot glue gun, and basically all you're going to do is throw some hot glue onto the ping pong ball and then start placing them onto your wreath. And the more random the placement, the better, because it's just supposed to look like a bunch of eyeballs have stuck together and created this gross wreath. So a little dot of hot glue will do. It doesn't take much, and you can stick it right on there and it'll stick pretty much right away, so you don't have to even hold it in place for very long. I think the cheapest place that you can find ping pong balls would be on Amazon. I think you can get like big packs of them for not a lot of money at all. And that way you can sort of choose the size of your wreath based on how many ping pong balls you get. The best part about using hot glue for this is that it dries pretty quickly, so you don't have to spend too much time holding the ping pong balls in place. I think like a maximum of 10 seconds of holding them there will really do the trick. So I actually ended up with this empty spot right here where a ping pong couldn't fit, so I'm just going to layer it on top. And if you end up with extra ping pong balls and you feel like doing a few layers, you can definitely do that, and it'll just add more dimension and more eyeballs to your wreath. And I want to add a little bit more dimension to my wreath, so I'm just going to go through and put some more ping pong balls on top to create a little bit of a second layer just in a few spots. And for our last ping pong ball, we're just gonna throw it on right over here. There we go, good to go. So now comes the fun part. We get to add the googly eyes to all of our eyeballs here. So once again, a pretty easy process. All you're gonna do is take your googly eye, add a dot of hot glue onto it, and then go ahead and stick it on to the ping pong balls. And you can have fun with this part. You can try placing them in different areas. That way, no matter where you're standing in comparison to the wreath, it looks like eyes are looking at you. Alrighty, I'm going to go ahead and finish this off with 2 more googly eyes, 1 for each of these, and then we are done with this step. Awesome, this looks so cool, I'm so excited. So now the very last thing that we have to do is just add a ribbon, that way we can hang it up on our door. Alrighty, so I have this Halloween colored ribbon here, and I'm just going to go ahead and cut some. The amount that you cut is going to depend on where you want it to hang on your door, so it's sort of up to you. I would go ahead over to your door and measure how long you need your string to be, that way you can make it the right size. So I'm just cutting a piece of this orange ribbon here, and all I'm going to do is go ahead and tie it in a little knot. That way it creates a circle. Great, and from there all you're going to have to do is glue this onto your wreath. So I'm just going to find a little open area. I think I'm going to glue mine down right over here, and I'm just going to add a dot of hot glue, just like that, and then I'm going to go ahead and add my ribbon on. And you want to make sure that you let this dry for at least 30 seconds, or really as long as you can, because the last thing you want is for your wreath to fall off your door and then all your hard work will go to waste. And once this is dry, you are ready to go. So now we can go hang it up. It looks so cute and spooky. I love it so much. I'm going to be showing you how to make 3 different Halloween lanterns in 3 different spooky designs. We're going to make one that looks like a jack-o'-lantern, one that looks like Frankenstein, and one that looks like a ghost. Here's what you'll need. First up, you're going to need some black construction paper to make the faces. You're going to need mason jars, some Mod Podge, black paint, scissors, tissue paper for the color design that you want, and some tea lights. You can use real tea lights, but what we have here are electric tea lights. And the last thing you're going to need are some paintbrushes and a pencil to draw out your designs on the black construction paper. So we're going to start by painting the tops of our mason jars. So you're just going to want to unscrew those and get them ready for painting. I'm just going to go ahead and squeeze a bit of my black paint into here. Once I have my black paint in here, I'm going to grab a paintbrush and go ahead and coat the entire mason jar lid. You may need to do a few coats depending on how opaque you want it. I definitely want mine as opaque as possible. That way it will really match the spooky Halloween theme. Don't be afraid to get a little bit messy with this one. Your fingers might get some paint on it, but no big deal. You can go ahead and rinse that off when you're finished painting. I actually love mason jar crafts, and I do a ton of these on my channel because I just think that there are infinite possibilities of things you can do with mason jars. You can turn them into different lights and lanterns and organizational tools. There's just seriously a million things that you can do with a mason jar. So almost every single DIY that I do has something with a mason jar involved. The type of paint that I'm using is acrylic paint, which is the best kind of paint to get when you just want something that you can use for pretty much everything because it's all purpose. It'll work really well on this metal and it won't chip or end up drying sort of weird. It'll dry really smooth, and it's definitely just the best way to go, especially if you just want to buy a big tube just to have around because it'll work with everything. Even though you want the color to be really dark and fully black, you want to make sure that you don't put it on too thick near the edges of the mason jar, simply because then it'll get stuck to the mason jar. You'll have trouble getting it off. So it's definitely your best bet to do a few thin layers rather than one really thick one to try to get it done faster. Patience is definitely key with this one. You're going to need to allow your mason jar tops a little bit of time to dry, but it'll be worth it even if you have to do a few layers. Also, if you're feeling a little impatient, feel free to go ahead and grab some black spray paint, go out in your backyard and spray away. That will definitely get it done faster. It'll be a little bit less messy for you and just a little bit easier to manage. So while those are drying, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next step, which is actually coloring the mason jars the color that we want. So what I decided to do was to take some handy dandy Mod Podge and some tissue paper and go ahead and attach it to the mason jars. Mod Podge is my favorite tool for DIYing. There's just so many infinite things that you can do with it, the same with mason jars. So I definitely always have a jar of Mod Podge on hand. I always prefer matte Mod Podge because I think then it just dries the most clear as possible. But there are tons of different finishes. There's even a vintage finish that you can buy for it, which might be cool for a Halloween project. So you can definitely go to the craft store and look through all the different kinds that you might be able to find and pick out what you think would work best for what you want. So the way that I'm going to do this is basically just by taking my tissue paper here, and I'm just going to go ahead and rip some of this off. And we're just going to start layering this onto our mason jar using our Mod Podge. So we're going to go ahead and start with our jack-o'-lantern, which is why we have the orange here. We want it to look like a pumpkin. So I'm just going to take a paintbrush, dip it straight into the Mod Podge, coat some onto the jar, and then lay down the tissue paper on top of it. So I'm just going to go ahead and smooth this down into place and We have our first piece there. If you end up with any scraggly pieces that aren't completely down, don't worry, because at the end we're going to go over with a big coat of Mod Podge. That way everything is down and staying in place as best as possible. I definitely recommend putting the tissue paper on the outside. That way you have the choice between using a real candle or an electric candle. If you put the tissue paper on the inside, it's a little bit dangerous to stick a real candle inside of there. So I think that putting it on the outside is the best choice, but really it's up to you. If you know you're going to use an electric one and you'd rather have it inside the jar, then go for it. It's totally up to you. And there's a few different ways that you can go about doing this. You can certainly put down the Mod Podge first and then lay the tissue paper down, or you can do what I'm doing here, which is laying the tissue paper down and then Mod Podging on top of it. Either way, it's going to stick down perfectly, so you're pretty much good to go. So once your entire jar is covered, you're going to go ahead and set this to dry, and in the meantime, we're going to go over and make the face for our jack-o'-lantern. So what you're going to want to do is take a black piece of construction paper and then something that will write on black, so you might need white chalk, or I have a white colored pencil here, so really whatever works best for you. And you're going to go ahead and trace out the shape that you want on your jack-o'-lantern. So I want mine to be a happy jack-o'-lantern, so we're gonna make it smiling. If you're not sure exactly how to make the face, you can definitely go online and look at different faces that people put on their jack-o'-lanterns, and it should be a little bit easier to get some inspiration. And the nice thing about sketching it out first is that you can play around with it until you have the perfect shape and exactly what you want, whereas if you just freehand it, it's sort of a one shot hoping that you do it right. If you feel confident doing that, go for it. You can just go straight to cutting out, but I always like to sketch out the shape that I want first. And once you're finished sketching it out, you can go ahead and grab your scissors and start cutting out your face. And there we go, we have our little face ready to go. So once you're finished with your face, the nice part is you actually don't even have to wait until your mason jar is finished drying. It's okay if it's still a little wet because we're just going to attach the face using more Mod Podge anyway. So all I'm going to do is go ahead and take some more Mod Podge onto my brush, and I'm going to line the face up on the mason jar and attach it. If your mason jar is still wet, this will be super easy to take care of because it'll just stick right on there. And then you can brush on your Mod Podge and hold it in place. And keep in mind that Mod Podge dries totally clear, so no need to worry about that. Another benefit of using Mod Podge is that stuff doesn't stick to it like securely right away. So if you position something a little funky, you can slide it around and make sure that you get it exactly where you want it without having to worry too much about it being stuck wherever exactly you put it. And there you have it with your little face on the jar ready to go. So now all you have to do is set this aside to dry until the Mod Podge has dried totally clear, and then we can move on to the next step. So I'm going to go check on our mason jar lids to see if they're dry now. And here we have it. These are going to look so awesome with this. So you can go ahead and screw that on, but before I put it on, I'm going to go ahead and drop one of our tea lights in there. So you can go ahead and switch that on and drop it inside. And when it's dark out, the mason jar will glow and look really cute. And the jack-o'-lantern is just the start. You can make tons of these in whatever cool spooky creatures that you want. I went ahead and also made one that looks like Frankenstein and one that looks like a ghost, which is so cute. Basically, to make these, you're just going to follow the exact same steps, except you're going to go ahead and use different colors and different faces. Be creative. You can create whatever spooky creatures you want, or if it's not Halloween time anymore, you can go ahead and pick out a different creature that goes with whatever holiday is coming up. You could even make maybe a Santa Claus or a little Cupid. Really, whatever you want. Use your imagination and pick something that's going to work for you. Now that all of my lanterns are dry, I'm going to go ahead and take my tea light, make sure that's turned on, drop it in, and then set these out to decorate my apartment for Halloween. I'm going to be showing you how to make a DIY hanging ghost that looks like it's flying. So what you're going to need is a soda bottle, a spray bottle with water, some cornstarch, wire cutters, a pair of scissors, a styrofoam ball, a spoon, some wire, googly eyes, a hot glue gun, ribbon, and cheesecloth. So the first thing we need to do to make our ghost is create a form for our cheesecloth to sit on top of. So we're going to create that using our bottle, styrofoam, and our wire. So you're going to go ahead and want to take the lid off of your bottle, and you can set that aside. We won't be using it for this DIY. And we're going to go in with our wire now. So you're just going to start by unraveling some of the wire. That way you have enough to create the arms, and this sort of depends on how big you want your ghost to be, but I'm going to go ahead and measure it out. I think about that long will be good, and then you're going to want to cut a little bit of extra because we're going to need to wrap it around the lid of the bottle, that way it will stay. So I'm going to go ahead and make a cut right down here, and I have a little bit of excess on top here that's coiled up that I'm going to just go ahead and get rid of. So now I'm just taking the wire and straightening it out a bit. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you just want it to sort of be as much of a blank canvas as possible. That way you can work with it exactly the way that you need it. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and take part of it and wrap it around the lid of the soda bottle. I'm going to wrap mine once around, should be fine. And then I'm going to go ahead and shape our arms. So the way that I'm going to do this is by sort of pulling it down along the bottle here and then bringing it out like this. And then what you're going to want to do with the very end, because this will poke straight through our cheesecloth, is just go ahead and create a little hand for your ghost right down here. And this will help the cheesecloth stay in place a little bit better. Okay, and once you have that in place, you're just going to repeat the same step except on the other side. Alrighty, and now that we have our ghost arms, you're going to go ahead and take your styrofoam ball and just sit it right on top of your bottle. This can be a little bit tedious because obviously it's pretty easy to knock the styrofoam ball off, but it's super important that you just sit it there and you don't actually attach it with glue or anything because we're going to need this later on in the DIY. So now I'm just going to go ahead and set this aside, and we're going to move on with shaping our cheesecloth. So cheesecloth is basically just a really thin material cloth that sort of looks a little bit like gauze, and you can find it on Amazon or in any sort of craft store. So what I'm going to be doing is sort of just eyeballing how much cheesecloth you want to use. It really depends on the size of your bottle and your styrofoam ball and all of that good stuff. So I'm just going to start unraveling this and see what I have to work with. So as you can see, when it's totally unrolled, it is pretty long. So all you're going to need to do is measure back this way for how wide you want it to be. And once you have that figured out, you can go ahead and cut it, and don't worry about cutting it precisely because you want it to look a little bit messy and not exact because it's just supposed to look like the ghost is floating there. So then you can go ahead and unravel your cheesecloth and make sure it looks good, and if it does, you can set that aside because there's one more step we have before applying the cheesecloth to our ghost figure. So what we're going to do is create our mixture, which is actually going to help to harden the ghost and make it take shape. So that is what the water is for. Basically, you're going to want to fill up some water inside a spray bottle, and you're going to want to use an even mixture of water and cornstarch. And when this mixes together, it actually creates a formula that will help to harden up fabric. So once again, I'm just eyeballing this, but I'm going to go ahead and grab some cornstarch and carefully put it inside the bottle. And once you have your cornstarch inside your bottle, you can go ahead and put the lid on and then shake up the bottle to mix it together. You're gonna end up with a consistency that's sort of like a little milky and cloudy colored, and that's really what you want. You wanna make sure that you don't add too much cornstarch, because if you do, it's gonna become a thicker paste, and then it's not going to be able to come out through the spray bottle, so you definitely wanna make sure that it stays fully liquid form. Alrighty, so once you have your cheesecloth and your figure and your water mixture ready to go, we can go ahead and actually create the ghost. So I'm just going to move this aside and bring back over our ghost figure here. And this is the tedious part. You have to move very slowly and carefully. That way this doesn't fall off and everything sort of stays in place exactly the way that you want it. Luckily, when it comes to something like this, you can definitely redo it a few times, so don't worry about making mistakes. So I'm just undoing my cheesecloth here, and I'm going to drape it over top of our figure. And now what you're going to want to do is sort of hold the head in place and move the cheesecloth around a little bit. That way you can start to create the actual shape here. If you have a little bit of excess cheesecloth along the bottom, don't be afraid to trim that, or you can even leave it and you can spray extra down there and it'll really harden up and stay in place. That way it will look like there's a little bit more to the ghost than just the shape itself. I'm going to go through down here and just trim up this bottom area a little bit, make it a little bit more usable for our project. So this is the part that you really want to go through and make sure that everything looks perfect, because once you spray the cornstarch onto it, there's really no going back. It's going to pretty much hold the form that you have set up for it. So definitely go through, make sure that everything looks exactly the way that you want it. And once you feel like it is set in place, you can take your mixture and spray it on. I definitely recommend laying down paper or a towel or something, because this can get pretty messy and it might ruin whatever furniture you're working on top of. So use something like scrap paper or just an old towel that you don't mind messing up and possibly having to throw out. And I'm just going to go ahead and take this and start spraying. This is pretty easy to do, and the more you spray, the harder it's going to be. It's sort of up to you. In fact, if you spray this a ton, it might even harden up enough that you could use it as a centerpiece, but since we want ours to hang and have a little bit more movement to it, we're only going to do pretty light layers of it on top. And if you're going to add extra layers of the cornstarch, you're going to want to wait for it to dry in between. You'll see sort of how hard it's going to be, and then you can decide from there how much more cornstarch you need to add onto it to make it perfect. This does take a little bit more time to dry, so if you don't feel like waiting, you can definitely just go ahead and make this mixture inside a bowl and dip this fabric in there. It'll soak it up, and then you can lay it down exactly how you want it, and it'll harden up even more. And once you're finished spraying this down, you're definitely going to know when it's done, because it's going to be completely soaked through. And once it is, you can go ahead and set this aside to dry. Depending on how much of the cornstarch mixture you added to it, it's going to vary how long it'll take to dry, but you want to wait until it's completely dry until we move on to the next step. So once your ghost is totally dry, you can go ahead and attach the googly eyes. Obviously, we want our ghost to be able to see where it's going while it's flying around your home. So I'm just going to take some hot glue gun, and my googly eyes, I'm going to put a little dot of hot glue onto the eyes and then attach it to the ghost's head. One there. And one right there. There we go. And here is what our little ghost friend looks like with eyes. So cute. So the last thing we're going to do to our ghost is attach a way to hang him up. So I have some white ribbon here, but you can use any colored ribbon you would like. And I'm just going to go ahead and take some hot glue and add a big dot to the top of the ghost's head. And I'm going to take my ribbon here and just attach it down like this. You're going to want to be very careful because obviously the hot glue is hot and you don't want to burn yourself. And once you have that attached, you can go ahead and spin it around to the other side and attach the other side as well. And just for a little bit of extra security, I'm going to take my hot glue gun and add another little dot on top of the ribbon to make sure that it stays in place. And then you're going to let that dry, and when we're done, we can hang up our ghost. So now that I'm looking at our ghost, I think that he would look really cute with a mouth, and so I'm going to grab some construction paper and create a little mouth for him. So for this, all you're going to need is some black construction paper and some scissors, and I'm just going to go ahead and cut out a little oval-shaped mouth for him. So now that we have our little oval, I'm just going to put a dot of hot glue onto the back of it and attach it to our ghost face. And there we go. Now I think he looks ready to go. And once everything is dry, you can very carefully lift your ghost up off of the bottle. This part can get a little bit tricky, but I think the best way to go about it is just grabbing his head here and then carefully pulling him up. And you can pull him off, set this aside, and your ghost is good to go. You can hang him up wherever you want. I think this would be so cute hanging on your door or somewhere maybe outside where it can blow in the wind a little bit and it'll make it look like the ghost is moving around.